If you're looking for a way to define Alfonso Ramon Lopez, you probably don't need to go any further than this house. This modest Ybor City bungalow and the man who was raised in it are very much alike. They're both symbolic of a proud community built on hard work, family, and dedication. And after more than 100 years, each is still looked upon with great fondness and admiration for what they represent and the place they will forever hold in Tampa Bay history.
Al Lopez, the pioneer, got it all started in my eyes.
Tom McEwen, the old sports editor for Tampa Tribune, I read one time that he mentioned wherever he went in this country, when he would tell people he was from Tampa, the first thing he'd ask is, how's Al doing? Al Lopez was Tampa to a lot of people across the United States.
Lopez was a class act. In Ybor City, you'd speak of Al Lopez in almost hushed terms. He wasn't a star who became famous and then walked away.
Modesto Lopez is no stranger to taking chances. He and his wife Faustina have already made the journey from Spain to Cuba in search of a better life. But by 1906, with a growing family and a newly acquired skill as a cigar factory selector, he decides to pull up stakes once again, this time for a boomtown on Florida's west coast. In 1908, with Tampa quickly becoming the cigar capital of America, the Lopezes welcomed their 8th child, a son named Alfonso.
He had 6 older brothers that presumably reigned over him, and he worked from the time that he was an early child. I mean, I remember he told me he shined shoes, he worked at Felita Bakery, he played ball as often as he could. He had an older brother named Emilio that was supposed to be a good baseball player, and they all thought he was the best baseball player in the family. But in those days, people had to earn a living, so everybody was scrambling to make a few dollars. He took whatever money that he had and took it home to his mother to help feed everybody.
And while hard work is the order of the day, Ybor City's residents have a passion for baseball that's growing almost as quickly as their Latin enclave and the industry that created it. In an interview conducted by Dr. Gary Mormino in 1980, Lopez talks about when he started thinking of the game as a possible career.
Did you ever have a desire to go in the cigar industry?
No, I didn't.
Why not? Why not?
Well, my ambition, not my ambition, I wanted to be a baseball player, first of all. I wanted to play sports. I loved it. I signed a baseball contract when I was 16 to play with Tampa Smokers. And I was lucky enough that they wanted to sign me, and they signed me to a contract. Got paid $150 a month, which I felt like it was stealing.
I think the first contract he signed professionally for the Tampa Smokers, nobody in the family had ever made that much money. So it wasn't a lot of money. But they didn't think him playing professional baseball was going to be a career.
What did your mother think and your father think of signing a baseball career?
Well, my dad liked baseball. My mother thought it was a waste of time, that I should go get a job instead of playing baseball.
Yeah.
And well, after I signed, and my brother tried to explain to her, that I guess that I must have been pretty good to sign with a pro club, she kind of started feeling, well, maybe let him go. Maybe he might become a ball player.
They were only moderately well off, and they didn't really have a whole lot of hopes for him to go to college, maybe even finish in high school. So they agreed to it, but they told him, this is your shot. You're gonna play baseball, or you're coming back to work at the factory. And Al told me, he goes, there was something about the smell of a cigar factory. He couldn't take it, he didn't like it, and he knew he did not want to work in a cigar factory. And growing up in Ybor City on 12th Avenue, I can't even imagine getting away from the smell of cigar factories back then. There were only like 150 of them around him. But he says he didn't want to work in those factories, and he knew he was going to throw it into baseball, and that's what he did.
By the fall of 1925, Al Lopez was just starting out on his journey to the major leagues. If there were any doubts about the 17-year-old's ability to handle big-time pitching, he puts them to rest when he gets the chance to catch legendary Washington Senator Walter Johnson during an exhibition game in Tampa.
The big train told him, look, I'm only going to let it out against Jacques Fournier, who was the National League home run champion that year. He said, I'm not going to call for too many breaking pitches. I'm mostly going to throw fastballs. But if I want to throw a breaking pitch, I'll let you know. And Al said, Mr. Johnson, I'll put it down. You throw whatever you want to throw. And of course, after the game, they asked Walter Johnson, "What about Al?" Because the newspapers almost publicized it like Walter Johnson and Al Lopez are playing. And again, he's a kid, They asked him, "What about Al?" And Walter Johnson said, "No, that boy did good back there."
Over the next 3 years, Lopez progresses quickly through the minors. After a breakout season with the Smokers in '26, he makes the step up to the Class B League Jacksonville Tars in '27, where he catches the eye of a Brooklyn Robins scout. Later that year, the team that would be renamed the Dodgers decides to buy the Tampa native for $10,000.
And then he advanced in 1928 to the Macon Peaches. And he had a real good year there, so much so that at the end of the season, they brought him up. They brought him up to Brooklyn. He says, tonsils about got sunburned looking around at the buildings when he first got off the train in Brooklyn. Most folks, I believe, and even the newspapers, believed Al would be with the Robins, as they were called at the time. They were the Dodgers. But most people believed he'd be with them by 1929. But the ownership in Atlanta with the Crackers they really wanted Al. They really wanted to keep him there. They felt they had a competitive team. Uncle Robbie felt Al could maybe use a little bit more seasoning, so he went back for one more year, played with the Atlanta Crackers in 1929, and then arrived in the big leagues to stay in 1930.
Making Lopez the first player from Tampa to make it to the majors. As significant as this is for him personally, it's also a milestone that seems to be equally as important to the people back home.
When he made it into the majors, it was a time when Hispanic players didn't have a real big place in professional baseball. There are stories of his being ridiculed and people yelling names at him when he would appear on the field. So it was definitely a different time. And his being the first player from Ybor City, I think, ignited a lot of people in the neighborhood who were also Hispanic, who also enjoyed ball, to think, well, he made it. I play right alongside him. Maybe this is something that's attainable for me as well.
I think a lot of people that worked and lived in Ybor City, to see somebody come out of the poverty of that area, I think they were very surprised and proud of that.
There was nobody, in the big leagues from Tampa. There were very few people at the upper levels of the minor leagues from Tampa. Those people in Tampa that paid attention to baseball, which it was the game at that time. If you look in the newspapers, go back 1929, 1930, it's all baseball, high school football and baseball, And it was just huge for Al Lopez to make it there, especially in West Tampa, where everybody was proud of him.
Over the next 18 years, Lopez would continue to give his hometown plenty of reason to be proud. He plays 6 seasons in Brooklyn, earning a trip to the All-Star game in 1934, and becomes a team leader and captain in the process. New York is also where he meets Evelyn Connie Kearney, who he marries in 1939. A trade sends him to Boston after the '35 season, where he plays another 5 years. About halfway through his tenure with the Bees, Lopez is reunited with his manager from Brooklyn, a future Hall of Famer who becomes not only a mentor, but a close friend.
He was very fond of Casey Stengel, who traded him twice. And Casey told him the first time that he was really disappointed that he had to trade him, and that he was really a good ball player, and he was sorry he had to do it. But then he became the skipper at Boston, I believe, and he traded him again to Pittsburgh. So, it was business.
It's that trade to Pittsburgh that seems to revitalize the veteran catcher. In '41, he makes the All-Star team for the second time, and the following year, the Lopezes welcome their only child, Al Jr.
He enjoyed his time in Pittsburgh. That's really where he made a name for himself as a journeyman catcher, somebody that was going to be there every day working hard. That was probably his favorite year, that year they finished second place in Pittsburgh.
By the mid-40s, Lopez's playing days are nearing the end. But the pride of Ybor City isn't ready to give the game up, as he describes in this interview from 1980.
Well, in my latter years, I was a captain on the team, on every team that I played. And in my latter years, every once in a while, I would have to run the club when the manager got thrown out. I played for Casey Stengel, and he got thrown out a few times. Yeah. And I would have to run the club. And in my latter years, I figured, I'd like to try it to see if I could manage. I didn't know whether I could or not, or even coach.
In the latter years of his career, he felt like he was going to be a manager. And I think he thought at one point that he was going to manage at Pittsburgh, because that's where he finished up his 17 years in the National League at Pittsburgh, and they traded him to Cleveland for 1 year, And he thought when he got through that year, he was going back to Pittsburgh, but it didn't happen out. And so he ended up managing for the Pittsburgh club, the farm team in Indianapolis.
The durable catcher who ended his career with the all-time big league mark of 1,918 games caught doesn't take long to prove himself as a capable skipper. A natural leader and team captain for most of his playing career, it's no surprise Al Lopez makes a quick and successful transition to managing. His first stop is in Indianapolis, the AAA affiliate of the Pittsburgh Pirates, where he spends 3 seasons. The highlight of El Señor's tenure in Indy is 1949, when the Indians win the Junior World Series, defeating the Montreal Royals in 6 games. With a 3-year winning percentage of .604, the Cleveland Indians are convinced Lopez is ready to make the step up to the big leagues.
He had always proven that he was a natural leader, that ball players were attracted to him, that they listened to him, that he learned. He never stopped learning. He was always studying. He was always looking at the ways that other managers played their game, picking up this, picking up that, and he was very competitive. I mean, to a fault. He wanted to win.
And if you want to win in the American League in the 1950s, you have to go through the New York Yankees, managed by none other than Casey Stengel. By his 4th season in Cleveland, Lopez has a team that's up to the task and a fan base that's ready for a championship.
They had the Cleveland Browns, a football team, but it was a second-class sport at the time. Everybody wanted to see the Indians beat the Yankees, and they had fantastic baseball players. They had a lot of great players in Cleveland. Their pitching staff was probably better than anybody in baseball up till that time.
With an all-star pitching staff with names like Lemon, Feller, Garcia, and Wynn, and an offense powered by the big bats of Larry Doby and Al Rosen, the Tribe won a record 111 games in 1954, knocking the mighty Yankees off their perch atop the American League, something Lopez predicted before the season, much to the dismay of his mentor and friend.
Well, you tell us, Senor, that unless my brain rots or my team gets hit by a truck, he's not going to win because the Yankees are. Well, the Yankees won 103 games that year and finished 8 games out. Now that's, you know, and years later, Stengel would talk about it. He'd say, you know, the Senor beat me, and you can look it up.
Unfortunately, the satisfaction of derailing the Yankee dynasty is quickly wiped away as the Indians lose the World Series to the Giants in 4 straight. Despite all of the success Lopez enjoys in Cleveland, it never seems to be enough to satisfy his competitive spirit.
When they lost, he would come in and sit down in front of his locker, and he would replay the whole game in his head over and over again. He would be the last one to leave the clubhouse. I mean, and he took it home with him. I mean, it was something that would bother him. And luckily, they didn't lose too much. They won a lot of ball games, but you know, the losses hurt. You could see that it hurt them.
Despite winning 181 games combined over the next 2 seasons, the Tribe finds itself back in a familiar position, finishing second to the Yankees. And by the end of the '56 season, Lopez and the Indians part ways.
Truthfully, he had a very good time in Cleveland. He loved the town. He loved the ball players. I think there was a little roughness with some of the ownership people, and I think he decided that it would be better off, you know, moving on. And luckily, after he quit, sometime after that, I don't know that he felt like he was going to manage anymore. I think the White Sox came to him and kind of asked him to come back, and the owners there were really nice people, the Allens. So he was impressed by how nice they were, and he went to work in Chicago,
where he takes over a very different team than the one he left behind in Cleveland. A team that gives him a chance to showcase one of his greatest strengths as a manager.
I asked him one day what he attributed his managerial success to, and I was expecting a strategic answer. His answer was the ability to handle 25 different personalities.
He looked at his players and said, what do my players do well? Okay, they do this well. They run, they steal. How can we improve that? Maybe makes a trade here or there to focus a little bit more on pitching and defense. And he runs with that.
I can still remember Luis Aparicio, Nellie Fox, Minnie Minoso. I remember Bunning. with one out to get him to second, Minoso driving him home, and, you know, close ball game, the big pictures.
I was a huge 1959 Chicago White Sox fan. Senor skipper Al Lopez was the manager of this fabled 1959 White Sox team with Nellie Fox and Al Smith and Minnie Minoso.
It's that '59 team, affectionately known as the Go-Go White Sox, that gives Lopez his second American League pennant.
16 years, okay, the Yankees won the pennant every year but twice. And, you know, that spanned McCarthy, it took, I mean, just right up into Stingle's era. Only twice, 54 Cleveland Indians, 59 Chicago White Sox. Al always had a target on the Yankees. He was considered to be the great Yankee chaser.
After leading the Go-Go Sox to an American League pennant in 1959, Al Sr. is unable to duplicate that feat in the 6 seasons that follow. Never one to take losing lightly, and with a new generation of ballplayers coming up, Lopez decides to retire at the end of 65.
Baseball was changing. Baseball was changing a lot, not just because it was desegregated, but a lot with regard to player issues and finances, and it just got to be, I think, the total package got to be a little much for him. Especially, you know, you get to a point in your life where you're like, in West Tampa they say, "Se acabó." And I think that's what he said, you know, it's like, I'm done with it, you know.
But not before compiling some impressive stats. Over the course of 15 full seasons as a big league manager, Lopez never has a losing record and ends his career with a .584 winning percentage, 9th best all time, to go along with those 2 pennants. Those numbers and a reputation as one of baseball's true gentlemen earns Lopez a spot in Cooperstown, where he's inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1977.
I want to thank the Veterans Committee who selected me for this great honor. I think it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I'm very grateful. There are 2 fellows in the audience today that they didn't work for me, we worked together. And I want to tell you, these 2 fellows deserve a lot of credit. They should be sharing this honor with me. Ray Barries and Don Goodrich. I also want to let you know that I had exceptionally good teaching while I was coming up as a ball player. I had managers in the major leagues, and every one of them is in the Hall of Fame. From every one of them, I learned quite a lot, and I thank them for it. I want to thank the news media, not only in Cleveland and Chicago and Indianapolis, but also all over the country. They were very, very nice and more than fair to me. I want to thank you for the proudest and happiest moment of my life. Great to be here. Thank you.
I had never seen him break down, but he did. It was very touching, and he took enough time to recognize everybody that was there and the family, and it was we had all our relatives were there, and it was really a nice affair. I mean, he felt very special because of it.
It was the culmination of, you know, 30, 40 years in baseball. There were still people in Tampa in 1977 that remembered Al when he was young, that had seen Al come up, had seen everything that he'd gone through as a player and then as a manager and all the stops he'd made. They were very, very proud of Al Lopez.
A pride that would seem to have no end. Long before he gets elected to the Hall of Fame, and while he's still actively managing, Lopez has a field named in his honor. When the city decides to tear down the ballpark in the late 80s, a group of longtime friends and fans decide to right what they see as a wrong by commissioning a statue of Tampa's first big leaguer.
I was selected as the chairman of that committee, put out a call for sculptors. We got calls from France and Italy and everywhere. We ended up with a sculptor in our backyard here in Valrico, and we did it on a handshake. We wanted this statue built his way. Whatever uniform he wanted, what number he wanted, the position he wanted. There was a tornado that day. We had an unveiling. I had all kind of entertainment scheduled. The mayor was there. We had everything set up. the tents blew over and the crowd diminished, so I went up to him and said, "Al, I'm sorry about the weather." He said, "Tony, it's okay. We kept away some people we didn't want here anyway." He always came up with something like that.
His retirement years are spent happily in Tampa, the city he returned to every off-season, and the only place he ever really calls home, where Lopez surrounds himself with family and friends.
He would leave in the morning, go out and play golf. Afterwards, would play gin rummy with his buddies and come home for dinner. And that's kind of how his life was after that. He enjoyed his later life. He loved his grandkids, I can tell you that. He had a big time with his grandkids, my kids. I was the only child, so I had 3 kids, and he was always there with them.
Even though Lopez passes away in the fall of 2005 at the age of 97, he is still being honored today. When the Ybor City Museum Society gets the chance to take possession of his childhood home, the decision is made to turn it into the Tampa Baseball Museum at the Al Lopez House.
We had actually already decided to do an exhibition that was on at the state park on baseball in Tampa, not specifically about Al Lopez. And so it just made sort of sense that we had already started going down this path. We knew how much material there was out there and how much interest the community had in something like this, because we knew how excited they were about the exhibit that we were putting together, that we thought that it could work.
Another monument to a man who ironically never really wanted to be singled out. Al Lopez, a name that will always be synonymous with the history of baseball and Tampa Bay.
He never boasted about himself. He never talked about things he did. It was there, and he knew it, and a lot of the people in Tampa knew it, you know. So it wasn't something that he talked about.
He was a guy who came really from a modest background, and he sought and he succeeded at the highest levels of professional sports, and all along the way, he made friends. And he made friends, and he represented his community.
He was just a regular guy in his eyes. We all thought he was big-time superstar and super manager. He didn't, but he was. He was a pioneer. He started it all, and it was special. Tampa, Al Lopez, El Senor.